Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. In January, an episode called The Story of Westcliff launched, where I discuss with my guest how we took a school from 30 students to 6,000 plus today. In February, we launched an episode called Leader of Leaders, where we talked about how to pick and develop the right people. Today, we'll be completing this series, and we're going to talk about core values and the future of education as it relates to AI technology. I'm joined again by Dr. Anthony Lee, who is the president and CEO of Westcliff University. Welcome back, Dr. Lee.
Thanks for having me again, Matt. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate you sharing your journey into leadership with us in the first episode, and then talking about how to bring people along on that journey and developing leaders. I really appreciate all the insights that you shared. And one of the things that I learned from you as a leader, working with you and spending the last few months having conversation, is that you not only have core values, but you actually live out those core values in a big, big way. I think often there are organizations that view it as a check the box or let's plaster them on a wall, but they're still distant from them. And I know toward the end of our last conversation, you were talking about not only bringing on leaders, but creating a vibrant culture for them. And that culture is backed by clearly identified core values that are being lived out. And one of the ones we started to discuss was the value of being a great global citizen. So I want to dive right in with that value, and I want to talk about it from two different angles. One being, how did your father inspire you to fully embrace this value? And in addition, how does exposing students to events like International Food and Culture Day prepare them to be great global citizens?
I think my father, who is an immigrant and came to the US pretty much nothing, really inspired me to understand his background and what really drives him. In terms of being a global citizen, that's always what's inspired him throughout his life. He came to the US and started an educational institution that really serves international students from around the world. And I've been fortunate enough to follow in his footsteps and really to take that on for Westcliff University. And the impact that we have been able to make as a university to over 100 countries from around the world is so impactful that it means so much to me. Value in understanding people's cultures, experiences, their heritage, their perspectives, and you really are able to achieve that when you bring everyone together to celebrate where they're from, celebrate their cuisine, their food, celebrate their cultures. We actually had a lot of students perform their dances from their country, right? It was their cultural dances, and it was fun. It was exciting. Everyone got to enjoy in that. And bringing people together, I think, is the key. Once you have that very collaborative and sincere sort of relationship with each other, it really translates into the classroom and translates into the workplace. You know, those type of relationships will help you open up, help you work better together, help you work more collaboratively together. Also, I think there's a sense of being inquisitive and asking and being curious about what others are thinking, what their perspectives are on a certain topic or issue. And bringing those type of perspectives together is how you can really make it valuable and come up with creative solutions.
That's awesome. And I appreciate you mentioning that. And I see that. I'm seeing all these different messages from your university, your organization tout all that. And it's just really, really good to see in real life. And I appreciate that. One of the things that we had talked about in the past, I believe it's been a couple months now, but you were talking to me about the importance of compassion, having compassion front and center in an organization. And one of your staff members mentioned something to me a couple weeks ago that I want to highlight. So one of your staff members told me how much they appreciated you having office hours, you setting time aside to meet with team members, to collaborate, to hear from them. And I was just wondering, how does that tie into a core value like compassion?
Well, in terms of the office hours, I mean, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I'm available for everybody that's a part of Westcliff University. I do that once a month on a Friday, and it's been incredible. I get to meet so many different people. As we are growing much larger and larger, I don't get to meet everybody anymore. I don't get to hire. I used to hire everybody as part of the university, part of the hiring process. I used to be part of so many things, but being able to hear from them, what they're going through, hearing from the students that they're serving, all the things that they're proud of in working with the student, supporting the student, and all the things that are challenges for them. They're able to voice these things to me, and I can do what I can to help support them better. And I think it helps. Sometimes compassion is just about listening, just about hearing what might be going bad for an employee that day, or something that they're hoping that can happen in the future. And if I can shed light on some of those things, or I can help support them on some of those things, it's going to make them much happier, much more content, a lot more excited to help support our students.
So I want to talk about the sacrifice for a second, because I think it's one thing to say something and then another thing for a leader to actually implement it. Like clearly there is sacrifice on your part on blocking time off to do that. I mean, there's a million other things you probably could be doing, but it's really good to see how you still make time to do that. So talk about that. Talk about the potential rewards, so to speak, maybe some of the growth that you've seen take place, some of the ROI, so to speak, that's come from that. But talk also about the sacrifice piece and what it means to block time aside in your calendar to open up your office doors.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we are just running so fast across the organization that you need to take a step back and see how people are doing. And I try to do this and try to be, lead by example. And for my managers that are reporting to me, that they're able to cascade that type of leadership style down all the way to every staff in the organization. When you're able to show compassion and show that type of generosity with your time, it just makes people feel so much better. And I think the ROI is really just about people are stressed out. They need somebody to talk to. They just need somebody to listen. And that on its own is going to help. And at the same time, once you do that, you're going to uncover some nuggets. If I get one or two nuggets out of a conversation, I'm ecstatic, right? We can do something with that. That's just going to improve the overall health of our staff and faculty, over the overall health of the institution. It's going to make it worthwhile, and it's going to be huge ROI in that sense.
Let's talk about the stress piece, because you mentioned people are stressed out, and often stress can lead people to potential infighting, potentially negative consequences. So I want to talk about how would you encourage a leader that's listening to this episode to create a culture of collaboration?
Okay, so if you are the leader, you should be the last person to speak in a meeting. You want to make sure that you are listening to everybody's voice. And for those that are not speaking up, you have to be a facilitator, right? You have to reach out, ask for opinions. And then at the end of the day, there might be some times when some of the staff members and team members are just uncomfortable speaking in a large group. If you see that, what I do is after the meeting, I'll pull them aside and say, "Hey, what did you think about that? I heard I didn't really hear you, but I really want to know what you thought." And then today's day and age, I do this a lot too, is I actually, we use Google Suite for our organization. I'll start chatting people, right? I'll just chat people on the side, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what did you think about that? What are you thinking about this meeting, right? And then if there's group meetings on Zoom, there's a huge chat feature, right? Not everyone's going to raise their hand. Some people are just going to chat in there as well. So I think it's seeking out input intentionally, being curious, really wanting to understand what others are, how the others are feeling. And one other point I'll make with collaboration is that as an organization that going through a lot of change and growth, we are also implementing a lot of change, a lot of new procedures, new processes. And I've always been the type to say, hey, how does this affect Department A, Department B, Department C? Let's reach out to those departments before we roll anything out. Let's ask them to get their input. Is it going to affect them? Do they have any things that might improve what we're trying to roll out? And you have to be intentional in those ways, because you never know, right? There's always going to be blind spots. There's always be some unintended consequence that you don't know about. And it's better to try to seek that out beforehand than to deal with some of the backlash that might happen afterwards, if you know what I mean. But we don't have it perfect. We're still trying our best, and we just have to continue to involve as many voices as possible.
I love that. If you're a leader, you should be the last person to speak in a room. I really appreciate you mentioning that. That is incredible. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. You had mentioned change and growth at lightning speed, a lot of different things that you're doing. And one of the things that you haven't lost sight of that I think is really important to zone in on and talk about, because there's a lot of leaders out there that are thinking about this or they've talked about this, but they haven't really done anything about this. And I want you to speak to this. Is as fast as you're growing, you still find time to focus on social responsibility. I think that's really important. I know as an organization, you've set aside time, you've implemented strategy into not only being great global citizens, but also being great neighbors in the community. So can you spend time talking about that, on some of the things you've done, why you're so passionate about that, and just some ideas that listeners might be able to implement themselves?
It goes back to how much work people put into their organization, and it can get tiring, it can get exhausting. And I really feel strongly that giving back to the community will refill your tank. When you are out there helping others and doing that in partnership with your peers and your coworkers, it's a great feeling. It's great. You're helping people. You're doing so many good things for humanity and for your community. I still remember I went back to Vietnam and I visited the orphanages. And at that point, we were giving out rice, slippers, donating to all these unfortunate children, many of them with mental disabilities. It was powerful. I mean, going out there and seeing who's less fortunate than you, and there were so many of them in poverty, that really made a lasting impact on me, really ensuring that I don't take anything for granted. And as a leader of Westcliff University, I think it's important that we make sure that none of us here take anything for granted, and that it's our duty to give back to the community.
How does that help with a culture piece? So, clearly people are coming together. They might be spending time serving in the community. What does a leader need to be aware of when it comes to maybe a budget with that, or allowing team members to have time to partake in that? What are some thoughts that leaders should be thinking of before trying to do something like this, implementing a social responsibility piece to their organization?
I think you need to be absolutely intentional. You need to be able to communicate that across the board. And what we have done is we've set aside a full day of work that can go towards community outreach. Any social responsibility initiative that you want to partake in, you can take one full day a year to do that. At the same time, we've set aside a budget to ensure that we can really donate to the different types of organizations that we want to support across the university. We also have a process in place for our staff. If there's a specific nonprofit organization that you want to support, you can apply and get donations towards what you feel is most important to you in terms of impacting the community.
That sounds awesome. I think a lot of people are talking about it, but they're not seeing it in action. And I think that you've offered a great example of different things to do. So one of the things I do want to zone in on and I want to talk about is, was there collaboration on what organizations to support as maybe a leadership team? How did those conversations start?
Yeah, I mean, it started with the leadership team talking about what different organizations that we could support. We've then put in place a social responsibility committee. So now we're getting together and talking about and looking at what organizations do we want to highlight most for this upcoming year. So we have to make sure that we have these committees in place to really have a sense of checks and balance with the type of organizations that we want to support, because there's just so many.
For sure. Absolutely. And I appreciate you mentioning that. I think intentionality is absolutely paramount to the success of something like this. So I appreciate you mentioning the intentionality piece. I want to shift gears. I want to talk about two things that have come up in our conversations in the last few months, you and I talking together. You'd mentioned integrity and accountability. And I want to talk about two different things that you have going on as an organization that I think speak to both of those values. So you mentioned to me about a nursing school, and then you also mentioned to me about a preschool. So one of the things that you mentioned regarding nursing is you seeing a need, especially across the United States, where there is a nursing shortage. There's a lot of situations where people are in, and because they can't get the care they need, there's horrifying circumstances that are happening because of that. So as an organization, you see a need, you say, we're going to do something about it. We're actually going to live out our value of being accountable to the community, not only locally, but nationally in this case as well, potentially even globally. We're going to do something about it. And then the same thing is true with the preschool. So can you take us through just your ideas regarding expanding into those realms and how that helps you live out those two core values as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think most importantly is we want to provide students with degrees that lead to promising careers. Nursing is in high demand. There's a huge shortage. And if Westcliff University can do something about it, I think we should. And that's why we have gone with all of our support and resources into nursing. We fortunately got the Board of Nursing approval last year. We're hoping to launch our College of Nursing this year by the end of the year. And it's exciting. I mean, we are going to be able to make such an impact on our community and fulfill the nursing shortages in our community in Southern California. And then the students are going to have careers that help them, really going to change their life. They're really high in demand careers for our students that we want to serve them. And it means a lot to us.
So take me through the sacrifice on this end. So clearly there's a sacrifice with setting aside elements of your budget regarding this, filling more roles to take on this. There could be potential headaches in setting up even the preschool that you have. So how do you stick to the mission, even with adversity, even with some of these stressors that come your way?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be accountable to yourself and the community, and that's how we view it. For us to have integrity as an institution, we have to continue to expand into areas where we feel there's a need. Absolutely, there was so much uncertainty when we pursued these initiatives. A lot of resources were put into play to make sure that we're able to get to where we are today. A lot of hours, a lot of money, a lot of uncertainty as well. We had to just keep pushing on because I really believe that we are here to serve our students and serve our community. So we're able to do that. In terms of the preschool, that is something that's very personal to me. You know, I have two little ones. I've been involved in education, and I believe that I can provide and help provide a very strong educational environment for my children. And it starts in early childhood. It starts as early as when they're 1 or 2. And I've seen that with my first daughter. She was only 2 years old when she went to preschool. And the advance in development I saw after only a few months was phenomenal. So when I saw that kind of impact, I was like, Westcliff University needs to do something about it. We're going to start the Westcliff Early Learning Academy later on this year. And I'm very excited about that. Not only is it there to serve me personally, but more importantly, it's there to serve the community. There's a shortage of early childhood centers across the US and in Orange County and across our communities. And at the same time, we're going to be able to serve the students of Westcliff University, those that are young parents, the staff and faculty that are starting to have little ones as well. And I've already talked to some of them, and they're excited for us to be able to have that. We're going to be offering that as an employee benefit as well for our staff and faculty. And of course, really try to help out our students at the same time.
One of the most amazing things, something that really excites me, is when I see a leader see a problem and then come up with an incredible solution for that problem. So it's incredible to see you step up and say, hey, there's a nursing shortage. We need to do something about it. There's a shortage in early childhood education. We need to do something about it. So that is just incredible to see. It gets me excited just knowing all the lives that are going to be affected positively because of this. So thank you for sharing that. I want to touch on three different pieces that we touched on the very first episode. The very first episode that was really a synopsis of your journey into leading Westcliff. You had mentioned three specific things. You had mentioned leadership, and then once you get all those leadership abilities and you're growing as a leader, then you focus on scaling. So you're scaling the organization, bringing people in, molding them, helping them become leaders, and then focusing on innovation. So I want to talk about the innovation piece because you have all this stuff going on regarding core values, building that vibrant culture, and now there's a huge innovation piece that is staring at us, which is AI technology. So a lot of organizations have thought of this. They're starting to implement things in order to potentially even combat this or embrace this or however people want to view it. So I wanted to get your perspective on this regarding AI. So just in this year alone, so not thinking years from now, but just this year, what are your thoughts regarding AI technology initially?
I think we need to embrace it. And I've said this over and over at our institution with our academic leaders, with our administrative leaders across the organization. We need to embrace it. It's going to be here for a long time. And the faster that we embrace it, the sooner we're going to be able to compete above other organizations. I think that there are ways that AI can help us in every aspect. It can help us in our courses. It can help students learn better. It can help faculty grade better. It can help our staff as well, right? It can help our staff with marketing, with HR, with policies, procedures. There's just so many things you can do with it. But the key is to doing it the right way. So when it comes to students, we have to be able to train them how to utilize AI in the right way. And there's many ways to use it. And I think part of that's going to be building the right culture that's going to be embracing and accepting it, but also looking for ways to put guardrails in place. How do we protect ourselves from plagiarism, from abuse of it? And there's ways to do it. You need to have an authentic learning experience for the student. So the more in our approach has been, the more live interaction you're able to have with the student, the more you're going to be able to assess that student's learning ability. At the same time, AI is going to help accelerate that greatly. We're working on an app right now that's patent pending that's going to be focused on how do we take all the content in a course and all the output that a student's providing and ensure that their learning outcomes are met. And that's something that I'm very excited that we're working on, and hopefully we can get to fruition at some later point this year. But we're piloting it right now, and it seems to be in the way that we're assessing learning outcomes, and it seems to be working pretty well.
So it's calming to hear your enthusiasm because I think there's a lot of people that are very scared about this technology. So what would you say to someone listening to this that might be afraid of whether it's this year or the years to come? What would you say? Is there a comparison that you can think of where maybe a few years ago something happened and a lot of people got afraid of it in education in general, and then now we've fully embraced it and it's a part of our society? Is there anything that you can think of specifically that people might be able to point back to saying, look, we were scared about that and see how it worked out for us?
Yeah, so I mean, the cell phone is an example. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with the cell phone. And I think at first teachers were very afraid of what could happen on a cell phone, but I think it's a tool that we can use. There's so many apps we can use. There's actually professors that are using apps in the classroom for students to like answer polling questions, right? To help with the learning environment. So I mean, there's a lot of things there that we can do to be afraid, but if you're embracing it, I think it's going to be fine. I think, how do we utilize it as a tool? And I think the sooner organizations are utilizing it as a tool and really look at what is the valuable human component and human side of it, then if they can figure that out, then they're going to be fine.
So you had mentioned your two daughters earlier in our conversation, and I want you to think about this from a parent perspective. So if one of your daughters talks to you about a potential, like in the future, about a potential career that they have an aspiration for, or maybe a certain degree that they're interested in pursuing, if you know that AI is going to radically change that sector of the economy, how would you prepare someone, even in your own family, to kind of view that? Would you try to steer them away from going into a certain career path because of that? Or would you try to figure out something else in that regard?
I think it's hard to predict the future for sure. And I think there's ways and trends you can look at to say, hey, AI might take over part of this industry. But number one, it goes my daughter. And if she's passionate about it, I'm going to figure out a way for her to go into that career because, I want her to be passionate about the career path that she's taking. I do think that in any industry, AI is going to have a bigger impact than others. But if you look at how AI is going to impact that industry and where is the human involvement that is needed to amplify that effect, that is the key.
I love that. Where is the human involvement needed to amplify that? That is Spot on. I appreciate you mentioning that. So we're talking family now. So let me bring up one of my sons, so who at times listens to these episodes. So I want you to speak directly to him. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent that has heard this, but he has mentioned to me that, oh, he doesn't need to learn that in school or focus on that because AI will take care of that in the future. What would you say to someone that's thinking in that regard?
What happens when your phone battery dies and you need to answer a question? What are you going to do? What are you going to do at that point? There's going to be a point when you can't depend on AI fully. You can't depend on your phone fully. It's interesting, right? So like directions is a very good example. People used to know directions, and now they just depend on the phone for directions. What really happens when your phone dies or you have no internet? You're going to be lost. So that's a classic example of where you need to be able to build your own knowledge, continue to learn, so you can't be overly dependent on some of these things.
So I really appreciate that response because one of the things that I'm finding out more and more is we're going to need to actually be better storytellers because of AI technology. Because I want you to think about what it's doing when it comes to writing. And then now when people are in a boardroom or they're presenting, whether it's in school or in their profession, they need to still be able to really connect with people on a deep, meaningful level. And it's amazing. There are many things AI cannot replace. It can't replace compassion. It can't replace love, and it can't replace empathy. So there is still a need for that human interaction. And based on what you said, the human involvement amplifying that. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. So, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for the series that you were willing to put together. I think it really speaks to not only your leadership, but also the journey of building out the university as well as focusing on key innovators. And I really appreciate that. From this conversation specifically, there are 3 points that I'm going to take away. I really appreciate you mentioning if you're a leader, you should be the last person to speak in a room. I think that really speaks to your wisdom and your leadership, especially when it comes to collaboration. A lot of leaders should be thinking about that. I appreciate you mentioning about not only the talking about core values, but how you live them out. I think, working with you for the last couple months, it is clear that you not only talk about core values, but you actually share and you talk about them through story. It really paints the scene for what the organization focuses on. I appreciate that. And the third and final piece, I appreciate you mentioning regarding AI, the enthusiasm you have, not the fear, but you said, where is the human involvement needed to amplify that? I think that's a really good place and a great perspective when we're looking at this. So all in all, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the insights that you've shared. If people want to get more information on Westcliff, they're interested in signing up for classes themselves, where can they go to get that information?
They can definitely go to our website, westcliff.edu, and they can also go to my LinkedIn page if they have any questions as well.
Perfect. I'll include that in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. But thanks again. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.